What's up, everybody? Welcome to Murals in the Market Live, coming at you every Saturday at 11 a.m. We got a windy one out here, but regardless, what we are willing to do for the art, all right? I'm out here. Now, it is always a beautiful day in the market. I'm over here next to the fire department today, so you might hear some sounds going down. That's all right. That's Detroit for you. How's everybody doing today? I see people signing on. I'm happy to see that you're all coming back to join me. As usual, we have a guest that every week we try to up it. This week, Askew one is calling in from California. We're going to talk about his love for Detroit. We're going to talk about his collaborative piece that he did with Sidney James. We're going to talk about Sidney, of course, because how can you talk about art and not talk about Sidney James? As we do every week, we like to do a little bit of house cleaning. So I want to go ahead and thank Ed and Michael for last week. My first ever twofer. Yes, me and two guys. We did our thing. That didn't sound right. My first ever twofer. Down on the other end of Murals in the Market, which you can see because not only do we do Murals in the Market Live, but we also do tours from Live Detroit. What's happening, Ed? How are you, brother? I promise nothing will top what we did last week, all right? Nothing will top that. But we're going to try. So thanks again to Ed and Michael for last week. Sidney James announced this week that she is doing a massive mural right off of West Grand. So I'm going to try to get her back on and talk a little bit about that because that thing is massive. All right, so we're going to get into that. I want to say thanks to Phil Simpson. This week he hit me up. We're talking about riding bikes together. Speaking of which, we do a bike ride every Thursday out of Electric Avenue Bikes, 3613 Woodward. Feel free to join us. We call it the Get Lost Ride. We like to take off and just hit the streets and see where we end up. Phil, last time we saw him, he had a flat, so he couldn't make it out. But if you want to make it out, once again, 6:30 every week. So, with that being said, we're going to talk to the man as soon as he signs on about this. And I was going to be ambitious, and I might still be ambitious. And he's got another mural in the market because he's actually like an OG. What you will see is when you walk on the walking tour, you get to see a bunch of stuff that you don't get to see on the bike tour and vice versa. And so I will take you to his other mural. At times it is blocked by a big fence because that's how this works sometimes. But hey, I'll see by there and see what's going on. I have some good news, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm waiting. It is connecting. Bam!
Hey, morning.
What is happening, brother? It is a different time zone for you. You're looking a little sleepy, man.
Yeah,
Thank you
you can
for
tell I
joining.
just jumped out of the shower, having my cup of tea with my wife's proud to be a knitter cup. I probably should have picked a better cup, but
No, that's perfect, man. You're proud to be a knitter. Art, that's art too, man. Thank you for
yeah.
waking up. For those who are just joining in or didn't hear me, he's actually in California right now, joining us live. So while it's 11 o'clock here, it is bright early at 7 a.m. We love to make the artists wake up early because you guys are morning people, right? Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I am. I wake with the sun, man. It doesn't matter what time I go to bed. As soon as there's even a hint of sun, I'm up.
Right on, right on. So let's get into it, man. I mean, we had an incredible talk yesterday. We talked for almost an hour, man. We could have kept going. We probably still be talking right now. So let's just get into it because you're going through we were talking about the world and everybody's talking about COVID and everything, but you're stuck right in the middle of some pretty intense fires right now.
Yeah, so I'm in East San Jose. I'm in the East Foothills at the moment. We've relocated here from New York and living with my parents-in-law at the moment. So they have a basement apartment underneath. I can actually show you guys a little bit of the view. That's kind of what I'm dealing with at the moment. Not so bad. But that's the most I've been able to see for last week, because about 4 miles behind us, further up the hills, we have the third largest fire in state history raging at the moment. And then there's another fire that's over the other side, closer to Santa Cruz, over the hills there. So while it's quite kind of clear this morning, usually by the afternoon, this just all fills up with smoke. So it's been a little intense, on top of everything else that's going on. But
Yeah, man. I
yeah.
mean, what are they doing? I'm disconnected, man. I don't watch the news as much as I should. So what are they doing right now in California to sort of calm this, or are they? What's the plan?
Well, the situation is, I mean, the firefighters that are out here have done an amazing job. They actually have this fire about 30% contained at the moment. But obviously, COVID has presented some problems, and this is a tricky dilemma because, generally they use prisoners in California to fight fires, which they can't do at the moment because of COVID. Uh, this is a tricky issue, like, all over. The whole thing is kind of tricky. So they had to choose where they were going to really concentrate their fighting, and there were also fires up in Napa and Sonoma, and they initially couldn't send the support there, and so that area got really hit really hard. But as far as like this area, they managed to actually fend it off pretty quickly. There's a historic observatory up behind us, the James Lick Observatory, and they were really worried about losing that building, and they were in there fighting like super quick, and they dug substantial trenches to kind of like hold that off, and they've held and protected. Like, there's about 4,500 houses up here that they were worried about protecting. So it's I mean, they've done an amazing job, but it is surreal, man. It's definitely like I saw yesterday people were sharing a bit of knowledge, about, just like traditional indigenous knowledge around backburning, which is something that obviously Australia is a place that gets hit by wildfires every year as well. And they've had to go back to some of these traditional, systems of dealing by burning the loose shrub and everything during the colder months. And that's something there's been calls for them to do here in California too, because the big problem was that there was a lot of shrubs. This area had never been hit by fire before, and so when it went off, it just went off. So yeah.
Wow, man. Wow. So let's not get off topic. I mean, but we do have to talk about the reality of what's going on in the world, because that's where our conversation went yesterday. Every time I would try to talk about art, we would just come back to like a different aspect of craziness that's happening right now in the world, man.
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on. Certainly in the United States right now, there's a lot going on.
Absolutely, man. So you are originally from New Zealand, and you were just over there. So talk about, well, let's back it up. How did you get into art in New Zealand? Where did you start?
Yeah, well, I was born in 79, so I was a teenager in the early 90s. And I think the early 90s was a really interesting time, just as far as the global explosion of hip hop music. The influence of groups, particularly groups like Public Enemy, who just, for me, just completely changed like my entire worldview, being exposed to all of that kind of music and message that was happening at that time. But also economically speaking, the world was in a crazy place. I mean, we were going through a massive recession in the early 90s after the 87 stock market crash, and New Zealand was particularly hard hit. Auckland City, for a bunch of reasons, just demographically, politically, economically, was just a hotbed. It was just ripe, and an amazing incubator for a graffiti scene. And it's the last place a lot of people expected it to really pop off, but everything kind of slotted into place at the right time. So I feel like I came from an era where literally every young person was really affected by this culture and was painting graffiti. Like, whether they really painted graffiti or not, they had a tag, they had a tag name. And so it wasn't really a conscious thing for me, like, as in, like, it was more deliberate when I started to explore more the art side of it. But just getting out and tagging with my friends was completely synonymous with just being a young person, So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. I started really painting around sort of 93, 94, and definitely by 95 or 96, it was just my life. I was obsessed, and it opened every door that's ever been open for me. All the opportunities to travel, all of the friendships that I've made, everything came off of the back of this. So,
So you really started traveling as early as '95, and really
oh no,
started.
no, I mean, no, not really. I started traveling when I actually organized a festival when I was 20 years old, which is something like a lot of people don't realize. But I organized a graffiti festival. It was before the kind of mural festival kind of context, like that wasn't really a concept yet. It was like a graffiti jam where it was like I invited artists from around the world to come and paint in New Zealand live in Aotea Square in the center of Auckland City. We built temporary walls, and so I started building a network and bringing the scene to New Zealand as opposed to going and traveling. But that set me up really well, me and my friends, because when I did start traveling by the time I was about 22 or 23, I had met so many people and made so many like really strong connections that I had beds to, floors to sleep on, people hooked me up paint, showed me the ropes wherever I was, I mean, it was just like the best thing ever as far as traveling is concerned.
And I imagine that really played into what you became as an artist. When you really started traveling and really using all those connections to see the world.
Yeah, it was really amazing. Initially, I first started traveling to Germany and Europe first, because at that time, they were really dominating the kind of the graffiti art world. I was really into all the kind of stuff that people like Dime and Lumit and people like that were doing. And then later I met Cantu, and these people were really influential in kind of shaping my approach and my attitude around graffiti. I didn't start coming to the United States until a bit later. I came to the United States the first time in 2008. But once I started coming to the US, culturally, especially because I was coming to California a lot, I found Californians really similar, vibe wise to like, particularly the guys from LA. I found them very similar, on a very similar page to us. And I built some really strong connections there. And yeah, and, fast forward, another, 8 years and, let me think how many, fast forward and I ended up living in the United States. So,
So where was the first place you lived in the U.S.?
I actually ended up in New York. I ended up
Of
living in
course.
Brooklyn, which isn't somewhere I intended, like, ever dreamed of living. I always thought I would find myself in California, which I have now. But from 2016 until this COVID thing happened, I was living in Brooklyn.
Okay. Okay.
Mm.
So when did you start to realize that art is not just a passion, but it can also be something I can do for a living? When you were doing mural projects, were you just saying, I just want to do it for the art, or were you saying, man, this could be something that I could really go forward with?
Well, I think I got a funny story. Like, actually, when I was at high school, I went to an alternative high school for my last 2 years, and it really saved my life. It completely changed my life. Um, I had a, I wasn't engaged in art when I was there, even though I was known as being a creative kid, an artist or whatever. And one of my teachers observed that and thought that it was strange that I wasn't participating in the curriculum art because we didn't have to. It was an alternative school. We didn't have to go to classes if we didn't want to. So yeah, it was a really
That's an
this
alternative ass school, dude. What?
yeah, you could come and go as you pleased. You could smoke cigarettes at school. Yeah, we
What?
called it was a democratic school. We had an equal vote with the teachers. Like we could vote on everything, like discipline, like issues of people. Some kid nearly burned down a church down the road, and then we were like, we had a meeting to decide like how this kid was going to be punished. We decided like if different teachers got pay rises or not. Like I mean, it was a crazy school, man. Seriously, it's closed down now, and I'm sure people won't find that surprising. So anyway, um, but it shaped my life. And this teacher, he came to me with a proposal, which was that if I stayed really engaged in the curriculum work for the first 2 terms, for the third term, he was going to suggest to the school and take it to the school meeting that I could paint on the buildings of the school for the last portion of the year with spray paint, and they would pay for the spray paint. And so,
Okay.
yeah, which I'm very fortunate. So I was 16, 17 years old, and suddenly I had this opportunity to paint on the buildings of school. The students supported it, and from there, my mindset was completely changed. Like I pretty much started hustling and going and asking my local like corner stores if I could paint their walls, and kind of hustling and making a little bit of money on the side. While I was still active doing the graffiti, I was already doing like kind of commercial work, and that mindset came from that opportunity that I had at school. I sort of realized that there was a space within the system where you could carve a little niche for yourself and do something. And so I was very young when I worked that out. And I was
Yeah.
kind of entrepreneurial, like in a weird way, like I said, I started organizing a festival. I started organizing that at 20 years old. I didn't know how to do anything. Like there's a strange connection to Detroit there actually, because
Well, tell me about it. Tell me.
well, well, I didn't know how to organize a festival, but I knew that there was this one guy who was like a dance party kind of promoter, like he was really into electro and techno in my city, and I went and hit him up and asked him, like if he could show me how to write a sponsorship proposal, how to pitch for sponsorship from, like different companies, how to, do my flyers, like all of that sort of stuff. And I went and hit this guy up, and he was a guy that did parties and primarily brought a lot of artists over from Detroit. That was the whole thing. So he's really good friends with Derek May, and it was really funny because when I was in Detroit, like not the last time, but the time before, actually me and Jesse went down to Astro Coffee, and he was sitting outside. And then, the conversation came up that I was from New Zealand, and he goes, "Oh, do you know Mike Weston, which is this guy?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then he like had him on dial, like straight away, just like called him, and it would have been like 3 in the morning in New Zealand, and we hear this croaky voice on the other end of the phone, and I won't repeat what Derek said because he used a profanity that probably isn't appropriate, but he called
No,
him
it's always
something.
appropriate. It's always appropriate, right? Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was a word starting with C. Like that is more offensive in America than it is in New Zealand because we use it very very casually. But anyway, he called him up, and this guy was so disorientated. It was like 3 in the morning, and he's like, yeah, I'm with your friend Elliot. Like, and he's like, Derek, what are you doing? He's like so disorientated. It's like, so it's funny how things come full circle like that.
So you've always had sort of this weird deep connection with Detroit because even before the murals project, you were spending a lot of time here.
Yeah, Detroit definitely was calling me. Like it called me. Like I ended up in Detroit in 2009 by the kind of weirdest kind of string of events. There's a guy called Thomas Hughes who had a gallery called C Pop
Yep, yep.
back. Yeah, and he wanted to go to Art Basel Miami like for Primary Flight, which was like kind of more like a graffiti festival in the beginning, but sort of evolved more into kind of a street art festival. And he took a crew of artists from Detroit, and then he also invited Tristan Eaton, who I had met at that time, and myself, which was so random because I was from Auckland, New Zealand, but I went out to Miami kind of representing Detroit, which was sort of this Detroit gallery, which was sort of like surreal. And they said to me, would you be interested at all about coming out to Detroit afterwards? And I was like, I really want to come out there because it was like December, so it was like really cold, and I got a very, let's just say, like I'm glad I came back in the summer the next time.
Right?
Just
Yeah.
yeah,
Detroit
just
winters are not a joke, man.
yeah, I got to learn that the hard way. I was outside painting. It's the first time I really like experienced real frostbite. Like my hand was freezing to the can. I was like, oh my god, I was like, but
Nobody got you a coat. Like nobody was like,
oh,
get this guy a bigger coat, man. Like,
I was like really like unprepared. I don't come like the city I come from. It doesn't snow, and I never really experienced that. And the times I've been to the snow, it was nothing like Detroit with the water coming off of the Detroit River and the wind rather. And it was like, yeah, it was something. But I guess that's what connected me to Jesse, because Jesse from One Times Run was there, and because they put on like a they tried to do like a rave kind of thing in a warehouse, like a warehouse rave, and I painted at it. but it was the middle of winter, and they couldn't really like heat the building, so like there was like 10, 12 people there or something, but one of those people was Jesse. And then he wrote me a really like amazing email telling me about what they were doing with One Times Run and asking if I would be down to do a print. And I may have been the third or fourth artist that they worked with.
Right.
So that connection happened, and I really enjoyed working with them. And that connection happened. And then the other thing that was a major thing was that my friend Revoke moved out to Detroit at that time. And so then I just had all these reasons to be there. So yeah, I was there for at least a couple of weeks every year, if not a month. For a good part of a decade. Yeah. So and Detroit, every time I go there, I have a totally different experience.
Yeah.
There's layers and layers and layers to that city. Like people don't even realize it's just such a complex place.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So fast forward now, you've met Jesse. How do you end up at Murals in the Market?
Yeah, well, I'd actually done I'd done a couple of I did one big solo show when they first opened Interstate Gallery. I did a big solo show there in 2014. And then I guess now I'm trying to think, was it 2014, 2013? It was around there. It was really close to when they did the first Murals in the Market. So then, they were conceptualizing this festival, Jesse and Ruler and Dan, all the team, and kind of working out what they wanted to do. And I was really, like hanging out with them a lot at that time. So I guess it was kind of, it was an obvious choice to invite me, because we'd kind of formed that kind of connection and we're working together a lot. So I guess what was the first one? Was the first one 2015? Would that be right? Yeah. So, and then when I came out for that one, I mean, there was a number of people that I'm already super close to that were invited, but also then I started to really meet way more Detroit artists at that time as well. That's when I met Sydney the first time, which was funny. Jesse took us all the artists on a tour of Detroit, and it started to turn a little bit into a kind of it was taking a direction that Sydney wasn't really approving of, because then people were getting fascinated with like abandoned buildings and all this sort of stuff, and Jesse was and she was sort of shaking her head and disapproving up the front of a bus and telling Jesse off and just being like, why are you showing them that for? Like, go show them something positive, I was like, I like this girl, she's cool. So I went and introduced myself to her, and then we've been friends ever since. So.
And now we segue into this. So you met Sydney, and guys, when did you decide, or how did this piece come to be?
Well, I know, like, kind of in the lead up to that year, Murals in the Market, I think Desiree and DeAndre approached Jesse and Ruler about wanting to commission a mural for their organization, which is Our Issue. And they were very much trying to change the conversation around rape culture, and sexual abuse in America, and kind of like tackle kind of like like how men speak about it in particular, and process that, and so they were really interested in commissioning something. And so Ruler thought it would be a cool idea to put me and Sydney together. And the concept for the wall, Sydney actually conceptualized the wall. Like, she took the lead on this project. When I got there, she had already shot the models and come up with a whole idea. And, she comes from an advertising background. So, she switched on. So, she had taken charge of that already. And so we just had to work out a way to integrate our two styles. So Sydney painted everything you can see that's in color. And I painted everything that's in the black and white. And obviously it's a play on the kind of like hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. So yeah, and there's the caution tape kind of wrapped around everybody, but they're kind of pulling it away. So, they're not being gagged anymore. They're seeing what it is, and they're hearing it and they're speaking on it. So, that was kind of like the a bit of the backstory about that. It was a really amazing time. I got to learn a lot about Sydney's process, which was really interesting. I think I mentioned to you yesterday, and I can't remember which artist pointed it out, but they said to me, it might have been Tylon Sawyer, he might have said it, but said like Sydney kind of carves with paint. You know what I mean? She starts in a really focused kind of spot, and she works her way out, and she really carves with paint. It's a really interesting process. I don't know how to describe it, but and then obviously it was just really great to spend that time with her. Like our birthdays are only a few days apart, so we're the exact same age. She's a few days older than me, and yeah, we like a lot of the same music, and grew up in the same era. And her family were around, and was super generous and cool. So yeah, it was just an awesome opportunity, man.
We
Yeah, I'm
often
very
talk.
very grateful.
I often, like, when I'm doing tours, I talk about when artists work next to each other or with each other, they build these relationships and these bonds. And it
Mm,
sounds like you and Sydney, I mean, you guys talked just the other day about the
mm,
mural that she's got going down now.
mm. Yeah, I mean, like, we were we have a really good bond, and we actually were really hyped. Like, we were starting to plot, like, kind of like working as a team more often after the back of this. Like, unfortunately, just kind of with the events and everything that's been going on, that hasn't been like really possible yet. But I still think there'll be more collaborations from us in the future. Yeah, I think it's really powerful. I think collaboration is really important, and I particularly think it's important to collaborate with people who are local, to the places that you go. Too often we go in as kind of outsiders, and we kind of just, we do what we're going to do without any kind of sensitivity or kind of understanding to the places where we're going. And yeah, like I just think, I mean, who better to really kind of tap me into, you know, the kind of energy of Detroit than Sydney.
Absolutely. Absolutely. She's so plugged into the community. And we always talk about how a lot of what you guys do is so community based, even though people
Mm,
don't understand how
yeah.
important it is to be a part of the community.
Yeah, I think like because like as I said, like I've had a lot of different experiences with Detroit, and my understanding, it's like an onion, like there's so many layers to it, and you sort of are constantly peeling to get to the heart of it. And the first few times I came to Detroit, I was a real outsider, and especially when Revoke moved there, I came a lot to hang out with him, and we were paint graffiti, you know. So my experience was kind of cruising around at the dead of night, and not really engaging or connecting with people in a necessarily meaningful way. Um, Slowly, as I started to become more acquainted with a lot of local artists, and just real local people, my sensitivity and understanding for that city changed a lot. And I realized that sometimes, like, it was kind of a graffiti utopia at a moment, but I don't know if it was necessarily something that was great for Detroit. I think it was great for everybody that was coming and painting, were sort of giddy and excited about it. But after a while, it was a lot. You know what I mean? It was almost too much, and I don't know if it's something that actual local people, were really necessarily enjoying. You know, so yeah, it's been interesting, man. To just kind of, I think it's important to, once you start making friends, you just understand the place differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm glad we get to talk about that because there's always the push and pull when people talk about local artists and
Mm,
international artists painting.
mm,
I had a lady one time, I was at dinner, and she said, you know what? I don't go there because they bring the majority of artists are from out of state. And I said,
right,
well,
right.
they're actually not. It's actually
Mm,
50% or more. But
mm,
I often hear the pushback, but between they come in and they do what they want to do, and
mm.
that's not true.
Yeah, I think that dynamic is always there. That whole dichotomy of kind of like, it exists in all festivals. Like, no matter where you go in the world, there's always going to be that. I had to contend with that when I used to organize my festival, years and years and years ago. Um, I think where murals in the market has been quite successful, is with their curation and how balanced their curation is. It's genuinely, it's the festival in the United States that has done it the best, as far as having the most voices, the best balance of men and women, many people from different cultures, a good balance of local and artists from out of state or internationally. based. I think like it's probably the one that's done it the best, so I give him a lot of credit, and I mention him a lot because a lot of American festivals are just not that well curated. Like they're usually kind of the worst.
Wow. Okay. I'm not saying wow because I'm surprised. I'm just saying. So, yeah, I mean, because they were kind of a pioneer in this game. I mean, they weren't the first in the game, but a lot of other festivals have popped up, since these guys have really laid the groundwork on what could be done.
I think like I mean the early US like festival was really Primary Flight, as I mentioned, which used to happen in Miami, and kind of really sort of made everything that's kind of popped off around there like kind of happen. And then you have to give credit to the powwow guys, and I think a lot of I think Jesse and Ruler connected really early with the powwow guys and got involved in that festival, and we're heading out to Hawaii and like basically as a kind of a sponsor, as the print sponsor, but also we're curating and bringing their own artists. And I think from there, they built it from there. I think they always had that intention to do something like that in Detroit. And Detroit certainly, an area like Eastern Market was certainly really like the perfect area for it.
Absolutely, it was the perfect area for it for sure.
Mm.
All right, now we get into the where every week they send me a couple questions, the listeners and the viewers, and they say, "Can you ask this?" So the first question I usually ask is, if you were to tell anybody who was thinking about getting into the art industry, what advice would you give them?
I think like it's an interesting thing, man. Like I always tell people, not to kind of like take from a corporate slogan, but you've got to just do it. You know what I mean? Like you have to like basically like you have to be crazy enough to just basically jump headfirst into something and be persistent and keep doing it. Because a lot of what we do is it's like muscle memory. You know what I mean? It's like you get better at things the more you do it. You learn through process. If you sit there and you cripple yourself, kind of, trying to think the most perfect thing or researching or trying to be the most prepared to get into art, you're gonna stifle yourself. You have to take that first leap. And artists we're delusional people. We have unbridled like self-belief kind of coupled with like crippling kind of like fear and anxiety. But somehow we wrestle between those things, and we make something meaningful. But you need to kind of get in the rhythm. You need to find your rhythm.
Gotcha. Okay, so next question is, where do you think the future of mural, projects are? Are they gonna, take off, or is it hitting sort of a point where there's just too many?
Hmm. Well, if you asked me this question prior to COVID, I probably would have answered it differently.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about this a lot. I actually think that I was becoming very critical, of the necessity of these festivals, and they had kind of become a bit oversaturated in my mind, and just as far as kind of like yeah, I was definitely calling that into question. I was writing a lot of essays and posting them online about, what I thought could be like the shape for the future of festivals, and trying to rethink, about the future of the spray can and different tools that we're using and how we could kind of reimagine them. And in this kind of post-COVID world, that we're living in now, where the brakes just got thrown on everything super suddenly, I think that there is a necessity still for mural festivals in this moment. I think that it's actually something that can operate with social distancing, and they can just be much more local festivals where people are just like basically, as opposed to flying artists from all around the world, which is obviously not possible. Other regions, they can be just done locally, and it could be done, with adequate distance, and it could give people something to see when they're out exercising and having a bike ride, having a breath of fresh air, and this work is made to be appreciated from a distance, but also, people need something stimulating to keep their interest in this time, because, a lot of people are stuck at home, and A lot of people are really like kind of getting bored and frustrated, and you can kind of really see that. You can see the kind of the cracks and the fissures and how they're kind of manifesting from everybody having a bit too much time on their hands.
Right.
So and it's a very interesting time politically, as we both
Jeez.
know. So it's like there's a lot to be said about this moment. And murals are a really great record, of what's going on in the world at any given time. So I think there's room for it. Maybe people just need to reimagine kind of how it's done in this context, because this may be the context we live within for a long time.
Yeah, man. We keep talking about COVID. How's it been, man? There's kind of an up and down. When I talk to some artists, they're like, I'm not that busy. Others
Mm.
are really busy. How's it been for you?
Well, I mean, the first thing that happened was that I flew out from New York to Auckland for what was supposed to be 10 days, and basically got stuck there for 3.5 months because the country closed the border and we went into a very serious lockdown. I mean, New Zealand's approach compared to the United States, and obviously we're comparing two very, very different countries, obviously in scale, like population density, like even just the politics are just so different. But we went into a very, very strict lockdown for 5 weeks. So they closed all non-essential businesses. I mean, you weren't getting takeout cocktails from down the road. You weren't getting like any takeouts. No food. Like no fast food. It was literally just grocery stores, gas stations, and supermarkets were open, and pharmacies. That's it. And you weren't really allowed like more than a couple of miles from the house. You could just go out to exercise. You had to maintain social distance. The messaging was very cohesive. Like, there were posters kind of everywhere telling people kind of what the protocols were and reminding people about hygiene. There was a briefing every day from our prime minister, and it was very, very cohesive. So coming back to the States, once I had that opportunity to leave and come back, and my wife was stuck in New York City the whole time. So that was a lot of the stress fell on her shoulders, and she had to pack up our apartment. We realized that we couldn't afford to be there anymore. One thing that happened almost immediately was the New Zealand dollar plummeted in value. So suddenly I
Hey.
was paying 4,000 a month on rent, 4,000 New Zealand
Oh.
in rent, and so I was just like, okay. So, she had to pack everything down and get across country, and here we are in San Jose, all of a sudden. So it's a total change. Coming back into the US, it was immediately apparent the lack of cohesion and chaos that's going on here, and the politicizing of the issue, which has been, and the amount of actual, not just misinformation, but purposeful disinformation, you know, and you can tell that this is something that's not going away over here. New Zealand initially eliminated COVID completely. They had 102 days with no community transmission, no new cases, only people that
Wow.
were returning and coming into quarantine. But now they've had another small outbreak again, so they've gone back into like lockdown. And that while that's super hard for everybody back home, especially people who are managing their businesses and everything, especially small businesses, um, it's um, it's hard for me to look at the situation in New Zealand and be like, oh, that's a bad state of affairs when I'm looking at what's going on over here. You know,
Right.
it's just
Right.
it's and it's just one of the many things that are going on in the United States right now. Very complicated, overlapping issues that are all compounding rapidly. And I think that probably the people follow me on Instagram, they kind of know that I'm harping on a lot about this stuff on my stories and posting a lot of reading material and things. Um, I'm not a rabid conspiracy theorist or anything. You don't need to be in this time because it's very obvious what's going on.
Absolutely. I say that every day. I'm like, how can
Sorry, I
people
think I was
still be
losing you for a
thinking?
second there.
Oh, hang on a second. Got me now? Better?
Lost you for a second. Sorry.
Uh,
Yep, that is.
Trust
Yeah.
me, that's
I
the
mean, you don't
least
need to.
of our
Yeah,
technical problems.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Least of them. But yeah, every day we talk about something new that we just can't take, and
Mm.
it's good to hear that an ally, we talk about it, and I'll be honest, as a black person, we talk about it all the time. We've been screaming
Mm.
about race, we've been screaming about injustices, but it's finally
Mm.
good because I think that certain people have to hear it from each other.
Mm.
And when you hear, we have an ally like yourself who is pointing the mirror and saying it's everybody that's involved in this. That's
Mm.
important, man, because we are in a place in the United States where I don't know how we come back from this.
Yeah, I can't really see an easy outcome either at this point. Like, it certainly isn't going to be cured, you know, by the election, and that's if you guys even have a free and fair election, if you have an election, at all. And I think that no matter what, I think so many people have been so seriously radicalized in the United States that there's going to be chaos no matter what the outcome. Um, it's funny because, I've been reading two books. I've been reading a lot during lockdown. Well, I say reading. I listen to audiobooks because I like to concentrate my time. So I listen while I paint. That's what I do every day. So, and two books that have been really poignant in this moment for me. First one was Jason Stanley's How Fascism Works, which I found really, really intriguing. Because it made me really realize that fascism is a very clear and defined thing that we actually don't understand, and we don't understand fascistic politics very well. And they're very prevalent in the United States, and they have been since the foundation of the country, actually. And I'm about 90% through Isabel Wilkerson's book Caste at the moment, which is a phenomenal book. And there's a lot of overlap with Jason Stanley's book too, because she looks at understanding the race divisions in the United States through the lens of it being a caste system, like an actual structure that was imposed during the creation of America. And she compares it to the caste system of India and to the caste system of Nazi Germany. And she shows how the three systems kind of overlap and are borrowed from each other. And actually, the way that the United States caste system even informed the Nazi system of caste, which, they actually look to the United States as an example, at the formation, of the Nazi Party and everything. So, and their kind of whole approach. So, it's a very heavy read. It's taken me a couple of weeks to get through this one. There's, but it's a really interesting way. And she looks at the metaphor she uses is she looks at caste is like the system, so it's like the skeleton, and she looks at racism as the tool, but it's like the face and the flesh, of that, and then she looks at class, and class division is like the clothes or the dressing. And I think that metaphor is a really interesting way to kind of look at it. And it's given me a really different lens for looking at these current events. I also listened to, oh my God, sorry, this is so doom and gloom, but I listened to Robert Evans' podcast, It Could Happen Here, about the premise of a second civil war erupting. And it was recorded about February and March last year. And so much of what he is talking about has actually now transpired, which is really scary. So to listen to that retrospectively is, actually really fascinating, but scary.
Well, we're in scary times, brother, and everything you're telling me, I'm going to grab both of those books, and I'm definitely going to start checking out that podcast, because it's not about
Yeah.
doom and gloom. It's about preparation of the mind, man. And the more you
Mm.
read and the more educate yourself,
Yeah.
the stronger you are, man. So, yeah, I'll
Yeah.
definitely check it
I think the sense of dissonance in this country is really strong, and I think that there's a really strong sense of exceptionalism in America that's made people not blind, but a little just kind of impervious to what's going on. It's a hard thing to accept that something that you see when in other failing states around the world could happen at home. And I think that's been a really hard thing for people to digest and process. But obviously, not for all communities, because I think for, certainly within the Black community, I think people have seen and understood this for a long time. So,
Whew, man, you definitely hit me off with some info, brother. And this is one of the deeper conversations that, much like last night, I said we could talk for hours and hours, man. And hopefully we will, dude. Thank you for
Mm.
coming on this morning. If there were any last words that you wanted to say to anybody, what would those be?
Shit, man, it's a tough time. You know, I would say to people that art is important. You know, I think that art is really important in these times. It's important for coping. It's important for communicating, and you know, like it's often the last record. You know, like that people have to make an assessment about the state of a society in a certain time, and that's why public art is really important. And so I want people to not lose hope. I want people to kind of you know remember that even though it probably feels like not the most important thing to be doing right now, um, it is. And I would encourage people to support the artists out there too, during these times, because a lot of them have, you know, it, when it comes to survival, it's a hard ask, to say, but, I think that we're realizing that there's a whole lot of things in society that get overlooked and undervalued that are very important, and art is one of those things. It is essential.
Absolutely, absolutely. And where can we find your current stuff? How can we support you? Where can we buy some of your art?
Well, you can follow me on my Instagram, obviously. Maybe you already are, Askew1. My website is askew1.com, which is ASKEW number 1.com. And yeah, those are probably the two best places to find me online.
All right, my brother. Once again, thank you, thank you, thank you for